All right, Chad Millman's about to stop by. Before we start with Chad, grab your smartphone, download the Game Time app. It's a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account real quick. Code is Colin, that's me, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. The redeem code is Colin, Colin, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's time for another season of Sharp or Square. After quite a sabbatical, I am now working again on almost a full-time basis. Chad Millman, CO of the Action Network. The favorites, by the way, have a $1,000 pick'em contest, free to play.
100,000, man. We're giving away $100,000. 1,000. Come on, we don't do 1,000 on the Volume Podcast Network. We're big time.
All of our odds provided by DraftKings. I spent a lot of time this summer in a place out east, very close to where you live. I played a lot of golf, and during that time, a lot of time to think about odds, and I almost did not do a first week of this. And my take has been, the world's changed. All these sharps pick at these line one odds. They have all summer to pick at these puppies once they're available. This is a terrible week to bet. And then I look at the numbers this week, and I'm like, they may not be the best, but I got a couple I like, and I'm going to start with one of them that I'm being warned about. Arizona plus 6.5 at Buffalo. I thought the Cardinals were a tough out at the end of last year. I think the last couple of drafts, they've hit on some playmakers. I like Kyler Murray. I think he's hard to duplicate preparing for. He's like nobody else in the league. He's like, to me, he's a better version of Russell Wilson in his prime, and Russell was pretty good. I think Arizona plus 6.5 is not only the play, I think they could win Sharp or Square.
Ish. Like of all the games, like you're starting with. I'm with you, brother. Like, I actually think there's a lot of opportunity in week one. Arizona is a team, I'm not going to lie to you, wise guys love. They think that in the NFC West, they love Seattle. They love Mike McDonald as a coach. They are really bullish on Arizona. This number actually clicked down, got down to 6. It was much higher even during the offseason. It's ticked a little bit back up. I think there was some over-exuberance on the Cardinals. And don't forget, this is the kind of game that the Bills historically not just cover, but dominate, right? And so there are so many unknowns in this game. Professional bettors, they are going to lean towards underdogs in week one, and that's going to be a theme for everything we're talking about, and I've got a lot of numbers to back it up for folks. But this one is trickier. I think it's 6.5. Yes. If it goes back down to 6, probably no. Don't forget, 6 has become a lot more of a key number with extra point sort of inaccuracy and inconsistency. So I can't give you a definitive. I can say, if I got to play a side, I'm playing Arizona, but I don't think it's Blazin by any means.
Okay, that wasn't my best pick.
Good.
I'm just throwing shit.
Good. Let's warm up. Let's just warm up.
Okay. The one I really like is Carolina plus 3.5 at the Saints. I think New Orleans is poorly quarterbacked and poorly coached. I think they'll be the first team to jettison their head coach. I think Carolina, massive coach upgrade. If you look at the wide receiver unit last year, worst in the league next to New England, they've actually upgraded. So starters are now backups. And it's like, oh, Mingo can be a 3 or a 4, not a 1 or a 2. I look at Carolina, I'd go money line. I think they win this game straight out, Sharp or Square.
Dude, you are Ginsu knife sharp right now. That is, you have gone from kind of mid, as the kids like to say, to full on super sharp. Carolina has been a team that at the Action Network, we have been hammering all offseason. We had been hammering their season win total over. That jumped up from 4.5 to 5.5. We've been hammering their odds to win the division. Everything about this team last year, and you and I talked a lot about this in previous seasons, we do this thing called luck rankings, which basically takes all of the randomness of football and puts it into a formula and then applies it throughout the season. Last year, the Panthers were one of the most unlucky teams in the NFL. That is always bound to regress in sort of very analytic terms. They won about a game and a half less than they should have based on the stats and the randomness of games. So now, all of a sudden, they've improved their offensive line, right? They've got a couple of new guards. They've improved at receiver. They've improved their coaching. Let's be very clear. Dave Canales, the new head coach, he was the head coach. Yeah. He was the coordinator in Seattle when Geno Smith went from journeyman to Pro Bowler. He was the coordinator for Tampa Bay when Baker Mayfield went from journeyman to leading the team to the playoffs. Now, all of a sudden, he's got Bryce Young, who there's a lot of negativity about. That's why this line is so inflated. This line was at 4.5. It's gone down to 4 because wise guys are betting it. And you said it about the Saints. There was a survey before we got to preseason, which fan base had the least optimism about their team. It was the New Orleans Saints. Who has the shortest odds to be fired first? Dennis Allen. Who is hearing footsteps from Spencer Rattler right now? Derek Carr. Dennis Allen and Derek Carr, in their respective positions as head coach and quarterback, are two of the worst against the spread of any grouping for the past 20 years. They are terrible as favorites. Also, just generally bad. Dennis Allen is historically bad as a head coach with a minimum of 70 games, which is what he has. So you are spot on. One stat for you. NFL division underdogs in week 1 since 2014. So the Panthers as underdogs to the Saints, 71% against the spread. Not only that, they cover the spread by an average of 5 points per game, which largely says, I agree with you. You could take a little bit of a taste, and I never mind this, like a quarter unit on the underdog to win outright.
All right. Weather concern could be a monsoon, but Commanders plus 3.5 at the Bucs. I think Tampa has to guess what Washington's doing. They have to go watch Arizona footage, LSU footage. Washington knows exactly what they are. Cliff Kingsbury banged the table for Jaden Daniels. Dan Quinn was a very good coach when he had the right coordinator. I think this coordinator, I talked to a GM that hired him, Steve Keim. He said, Cliff is great. He said, I don't know if he's an NFL head coach. The discipline is an issue. But as an NFL coordinator or a college coach, he said, I would back him forever. This is a great role for Kingsbury. I think Washington's personnel is fine. Tampa's guessing. I think they pull back as a team this year, Tampa. I'm going to take Commanders plus 3.5.
Yeah, it's sharp. I mean, it's not the favorite. Like if I had 8 bets I had to make this weekend, this is probably 7th or 8th, right? I will be playing the Commanders, but this team right now, I just talked about the luck rankings, the Buccaneers, and you noted there's going to be some regression. The Buccaneers were amongst the luckiest teams in the NFL last year, and the Commanders were one of the 10 most unlucky. So just the gap between these two teams is reflected, I think, in a higher than it should be point spread because of perception, right? The Commanders, number 2, number 3 overall pick. The Buccaneers, they made the playoffs. They had a good run. They have lost important aspects of that team, specifically Dave Canales. Baker, 14-26 in his career as a favorite. Everything about this game says take the Commanders. So the wise guys are with you.
An interesting game. I don't like big favorites in the opening week. And I think Bo Nix and Sean Payton are going to be excellent together compared to what the market predicts. I think they're a 7-win team, not a 4-win team. Do not like them here. Rookies starting week 1 on the road against a very sharp, maybe the next DeMeco Ryans defensive coach. Seattle, I like Pete Carroll last 2 years. They underwhelmed. They have better talent. I mean, offensively, it's Noah's Ark. 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, 2 tackles. I like everything. I think Seattle -6 is the play. This is a rough spot, and I like Bo Nix. This is a rough opening week. I take Seattle -6.
Yeah, look, that's the exact right spot. Historically, rookie quarterbacks on the road are just terrible. Rookie first round picks on the road average 18 points per game the past 10 years. It is not a good spot. There is a lot of professional better love for Mike Macdonald. They loved the game plans he put together when he was the defensive coordinator in Baltimore. They are expecting a much better defense in Seattle. I think that's what you're seeing here is just a little bit of a difference in talent on the roster. Historically, wise guys, they don't like to bet against Sean Payton. They're the guy, like Sean Payton is their favorite coach along with Mike Tomlin.
Right.
But Mike Macdonald's in the spot. Like they look at him not as a rookie head coach. In a lot of ways, the way that people looked at D'Amico Ryans last year, they got a lot of faith in what he can do. So wise guys are with you.
I'm going to take Jets plus 4.5 against the Niners. It's a noisy game, the Baggage Bowl, but Trent Williams can't be in great shape. I do worry about Green Bay. I do worry about Hassan Reddick not in camp because they lost Huff to the Eagles, but I don't worry too much about pass rush. I don't like the Niners' offensive line, especially when Trent just gets back into camp. That feels like it's just too rich. I don't know if they win, but God, I don't get the line at all. I would take the Jets plus 4.5 sharp
Totally
or square.
sharp. It's what's really interesting about this, Colin, is since Trent Williams signed, the line has moved a full point from 3.5 to 4.5. That's how much bookmakers and then the public bettors believe Trent Williams was worth. They have steamed this line up, and wise guys are happy to take the 4.5. You mentioned the offensive line for the 49ers. That's the weakness of their team, right? And even with Trent Williams, who is probably the best left tackle in the NFL, they are able to mask that weakness because Kyle Shanahan's scheme is so good in the way he can move the ball around that they're able to get away with having an offensive line that is a little bit mediocre. The Jets have one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. And I agree with you about Hassan Reddick. The guy hasn't played for the Jets at all. So they don't really know what they're missing. And obviously Bryce Huff being gone is an impact, but they have a stout defensive line. They will find a way to get to the quarterback against this offensive line. The wise guys love the Jets in this spot.
All right. Another game. I never trust the Browns, ever. I love their coach. And I have real questions about the depth of Dallas's offensive talent. I worry about blocking Myles Garrett. But God, I know what I get from Dak and Mike McCarthy. I don't know what the hell I get with Deshaun Watson. I get Dallas plus 2.5. I'm going to take them. I'm going to take the Cowboys sharp.
Yeah, it's sharp, but not a lot of conviction. Like it's not, I just said there's probably 8 bets on the board.
I was going to say, my voice told you I didn't.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of conviction. I'm actually surprised you chose it. I don't know if you feel like you got to talk about the Cowboys as like the lowest common denominator as a member of the media, but like, it's not a game that I'm excited about, like as a bettor for all the reasons you just said. I think the Cowboys are the Houston Rockets circa 2012 of the NFL, right? A lot of talent. They're great in the regular season, fall apart when it matters. I'm not a buyer on McCarthy. I just don't think he's a very good coach. I think what you said about the lack of depth on offense is a real issue, and that's continued to be an issue for the past couple of years. Listen, the Browns defense last year at home, historic. Myles Garrett, we just talked about Trent Williams being a line changer when it comes to moving the point spread. Myles Garrett is like that. Myles Garrett is the kind of defensive force from a betting perspective and from a line making perspective that J.J. Watt was about 12 years ago. Bookmakers have to account for his presence with half a point in terms of the spread. But we don't know anything about Deshaun Watson. And also, I will tell you one other thing that I think is sticking out in people's minds from a professional betting point of view. Bill Callahan is an offensive line coach genius. And he is one of the reasons why that Browns team, they could lose Nick Chubb. They could lose any running back, get someone back in there, and anybody was going to make that team produce. I love Kevin Stefanski too. He left. He went to the Titans to work with his son, who's now the head coach of the Titans. So I do think the wise guys are on the Cowboys, but no one's banging the drum, being like rushing the counter. I got to get on the Cowboys right now.
Okay, this one's painful for me
And
to
that's the
make
best kind.
because I know, I really want to see the Bears flourish, and I think they will. But God, if the line goes to +4 for the Titans, rookie quarterback, Titans plus the points, you're shaking your head, sharp
It's
or
totally
square.
sharp. And look, it pains me as a Chicagoan, as someone who loves this team so much and was weepy-eyed watching all of the Hard Knock stuff, seeing the team walk in and out of Hallis Hall, practicing in Lake Forest, the introductions, making it feel like this is the premier franchise in the NFL because of its history, even though we've only won one Super Bowl. Dude, this hype is just too much. I mean, it's still a team that has not breached 500 in God knows how long. It's still a team with a rookie quarterback. It's now a team where if you want to bet on the Bears season win total, you got to bet that they're going to be over 500. A rookie quarterback in a division that has the Packers, who a lot of people think could go to the Super Bowl, the Lions, who a lot of people think should be the #1 seed in the NFC this year. Like, this is a lot. And I know Caleb Williams says, I don't get nervous before games. He should get nervous because this Tennessee team has improved at every single place they need to improve. They've gotten much better in the defensive backfield with L'Jarius Sneed. They've gotten better at receiver. They have improved their offensive line, not just in scheme and talent, but with coaching. I worry about the Bears in this spot. Way, way too much hype and enthusiasm.
All right, we always end with a game that I missed, but also a game that I don't have the courage to bet, but I just want your opinion. Sam Darnold minus points on the road scares me, but God, the Giants are bad. Minnesota -2. I think I'd swallow the 2 with Minnesota. Talk me in or out of that game.
You don't want to swallow the 2 with Minnesota. You want to take the Giants. And look, this one is divided. I'm not going to lie to you. Like when Simon Hunter and I do the Favorites podcast on the Volume Podcast Network, we will always do a segment called Sharp Calls, where professional bettors who listen to our show on Tuesday will call us on Wednesday and tell us everything they agree with and everything they disagree with. It is the greatest peanut gallery in the world. When we did our Thursday show and we did the Sharp Calls segment, this was the biggest division. Was half the group was on the Vikings, half the group was on the Giants. I feel like Simon and I are in a bit of a foxhole with this game. I like the Giants. I actually have bet the Vikings 15-1 for the worst record in the NFL this year. Their schedule after they play the Giants. Niners, brutal. Texans, Packers, Jets. This team, if they don't win against the Giants, they could be winless when we get to the end of October. So I like the Giants here. There's some really important trends that we actually haven't gotten to yet that I think are really important. Underdogs between 1 and 5.5 points in week 1 since 2018 cover at a 64% clip. It's a pretty big sample size of more than 150 games. So, and favorites of 1 to 3.5 points cover only 43% of the time in September. So we've got pretty good trends when we talk about bettings weeks 1, especially as you were discussing when we opened the segment, that show you why you can take advantage and why you want to bet underdogs. This is also a really interesting coach matchup to me, right? 2 years ago, these guys are the belle of the ball. And Daboll wins Coach of the Year. Both of these teams are winning games that are less than 1-score games, and they're winning them consistently. They play each other in the playoffs. Daboll and Daniel Jones going to Minnesota. They beat Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell. And so there's a lot of sentiment that Brian Daboll is a really good coach. And then last year, everything falls apart for both of them. So I do think there's a little bit too much hate on the Giants right now and a little bit too much credit on the Vikings. Sam Darnold should not be a road favorite ever. He shouldn't be a road favorite in any scenario. He just shouldn't. So you got to take the Giants.
Okay, finally, a game I missed. I am betting you it's Colts plus the points. I know it's the Colts plus the point. Is it?
It's 100%.
I knew it. And I love Houston.
Yeah,
I knew
it's 100%. The Colts plus, I think you can get them +3, some places +3.5 now. This line was 2.5, 48 hours ago. The public is steaming in on the Texans, and the wise guys are buying on the Colts. And look, it's a little tricky. Anthony Richardson has basically played like 17 games at quarterback since high school.
I know.
Right? And then you got the Texans, who look like they are all world. But I do want to give some context here. The Texans do not win the AFC South if Trevor Lawrence doesn't get injured. The Colts almost made the playoffs with Gardner Minshew playing the majority of the games last season. I think Shane Steichen is a genius of a coach. And
yes,
what he did with Minshew and what he was starting to do with Anthony Richardson is brilliant. And I think the level of play that the Eagles had last year on offense and what you saw from the Colts is a direct correlation between Shane Steichen being on Indy and not being with Philly anymore. I think there's a huge advantage there. Also, to repeat, division underdogs, 37-15-1 against the spread in week one since 2014. That's 71%. This is a really good spot for the Colts against a overvalued Texans team.
I want you to just give my audience something here. Just entertain me and make my audience smarter. So I think the Rams, the last 2 years, last year and this year, are undervalued, but their O-line is a bit of a musical chair situation. Sean McVay and Stafford getting 3.5 against an average defense feels like stealing money, but I'm really reticent in this spot. I don't like their O-line. Hutchison had, according to, all the Lion news, they're like, he's now the best defensive rush end in the league. He's just tearing it up. I look at this line, I think McVay, Stafford, plus 3.5, but there's something that tells me stay away. Educate me.
Your instincts are spot on, and this was the hardest game. The other bet that we do on the podcast, it's called our Big Balls Bet of the Week, and it's the bet we know is hard to make, but you 100% have to have the courage to make it. This week, it is the Detroit Lions minus 3.5 over the Los Angeles Rams. And who likes to bet a favorite in any scenario, especially when I've given you all these trends? But here's the thing about these trends. 58%, 61%. What that really means is that, yeah, you're going to have an edge if you bet it long term. What I'm trying to do here is thread the needle and catch a falling knife, where the other 40% of the time, it doesn't work, right? And so, look, I love the Rams, and we have made so much money on the Rams the past couple of years because I do think Matthew Stafford is probably the most, if it's possible, the most underrated quarterback. He never gets into the conversation of top 3, top 4, and he should. If there was a great video this offseason of CJ Stroud talking about quarterbacks he likes to watch, it was Matthew Stafford. NFL players love Matthew Stafford. He is a gamer. And what he did last year when Cooper Kupp was out and turned Puka Nacua into an all-world receiver, he is brilliant. And I really want to bet the Rams. But here's the problem. And I want to fade the Lions because the variance is so high when you're betting on a Dan Campbell team because of the way he goes for it on fourth down, which can always bite you, as it did in the NFC title game and when the Niners came back. They are so foundationally good. And when I bet, and when a lot of professionals bet, they bet from inside out. They look at the offensive line. They look at the defensive line. That's where they start. They don't start on the edges. They don't start with the quarterbacks. They start foundationally. The Lions are one of the few teams with top 5 offensive line, top 5 defensive line. Penei Sewell on one side. Then you mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. I bet Aiden Hutchinson 14-1 to lead the league in sacks. Everything coming out of camp was how this guy has gotten better and better. And last year, he was dominant. No matter what the situation was, no matter how often he was being double teamed, he consistently got pressure on quarterbacks, even if it wasn't always a sack. So if you look at those things, I'm like, wait a second. Aaron Donald, retired. Offensive line for the Rams, in trouble. Jared Goff, undefeated against the spread to start the season in his career. Jared Goff, 25-9 against the spread indoors. Jared Goff, the most profitable quarterback against the spread the past 5 years. Dan Campbell, the most profitable coach against the spread the past 5 years. I know, like, it's hard to bet on a more than a field goal favorite in a game that ended as a very short win for the Lions last year in the playoffs. I think the Lions have gotten better. I think the Rams have stagnated or a little bit worse because their talent isn't as good. So it hurts, but I'm on the Lions.
Sharper square, all odds provided by DraftKings. The favorites have a $100,000 pick'em contest, and it's free to play, which sounds like a bad business move by you. You should charge
Colin,
people.
Listen, we're on the Volume Podcast Network. We want to engage as many people as possible. And if it's going to cost us money, we don't care. If we look good, you look good. That's what we care about. Anybody can play. And here's what's fun. Me and Simon, we will make our 5 picks. We enter the contest. We talk about the picks we're going to enter on our show. People love to compete against us. So you enter 5 picks every week. You can win, be part of the $100,000 prize pool. Favorites.actionnetwork.com is the sign up. And by the way, we give away 1,000 a week to the person with the best record. So we're giving money away all season long in our effort to make the Volume Podcast Network the biggest podcast network in the world. Go sign up, win $100,000. Favorites.actionnetwork.com.
Yeah, the Favorites is the absolute best sports gambling pod in the country. We love having you guys back. And God, I'm gonna go buy a jet ski on that Panthers pick.
I know.
That's my pick of the week.
But here's the problem.
God.
Here's the problem.
Yeah.
It might not go our way. And that's okay. That is okay. Because in the long run, we got to play the fundamentals. And like, it might not work this weekend. Over the long run, it's going to work out. But man, I am like so invested in this Panthers team. I am so nervous about this game. I'm nervous about the Lions game. I'm nervous about the Jets game. And I'm nervous about the Colts game and the Giants game. I'm sick to my stomach, brother. Season's back.
All right, buddy. It is. That is awesome. Awesome.
All right, brother. Good to see you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for letting me promo out my nose.
Oh, of course. I'm
fired All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
That's what we do. This week's college football preview is brought to you by our friends at Cosm. Cosm is the world's greatest fan experience, no doubt. If you're in LA or Dallas and you want a completely immersive experience, go check out the Colorado-Nebraska game in the Cosm Immersive Dome on Saturday, as well as every game on in the Hall. Colorado-Nebraska, check it out. Head to cosm.com for tickets and info on all their programming. One of the more interesting games this weekend is Colorado and Deion Sanders and all he brings to the table at Nebraska. Now, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders for the Buffaloes are the 2 best players in the game. And they alone may be able to carry Colorado to the win. But I like Nebraska for a lot of reasons. Number one is, if you go to last year, nobody lost more close games down the stretch than Nebraska. They were close. They needed a couple transfers. They needed to get a little older on the defensive side. It didn't matter if it was Iowa, it was Maryland, it was Michigan State. They lost by a field goal. It felt like every week, and they were shooting themselves in the foot with a lot of ugly turnovers. This defense now is different. 6 seniors, 5 juniors start. And that matters. A lot of starts against the Colorado offense and offensive line that I haven't loved for the last couple of years. Again, Colorado's got the 2 best players in this game. Maybe the 3 or 4 best. Depth, experience. I like Nebraska. The other thing is that Colorado has, by and large, last 3 matchups has won. Nebraska's not overlooking anybody. Also, I tend to look at programs. I think there's baby steps. I think when you take over a program, first of all, the first sign you're doing it right is you're closing the gap. Nebraska last year, close losses. Generally, those kind of teams the following year start turning those into close wins. And then the following year, if you have the right coach and the right players, you have decisive wins. I don't think Nebraska's in a decisive win territory yet against the better teams on their schedule, but I don't think Colorado's one of the better teams on their schedule. I like Nebraska by 10 points. I think their defense, though it won't be a perfect game, Shedeur Sanders, he moves well. I really like him. I mean, I almost feel like if Shedeur Sanders, if you're going to judge him just on football, he could be the number one pick in the draft. His ability to place the ball, moving pocket, moving left, moving right, moving forward, he has tremendous ball placement. And he's kind of what everybody's looking for. He can win in the pocket. He can win off script. So I think Colorado is going to score some points and be a handful. But I think Matt Rule situationally is a better coach than Deion. Deion's a bigger presence. Deion may be a better recruiter. But, I mean, Nebraska was I looked it up this morning, top 30 in tackles for loss last season. And now this defense, 6 seniors, 5 juniors, is even older. They are more than capable at quarterback. Dylan Raiola is fine. He's not Shedeur Sanders, but he's fine. Nebraska at home, more experienced defense. Matt Rule losing close to now winning close. I'm going to take him by about 8 to 10 points here. A little 33-24 kind of feels like that to me. I like the Huskers. All right, the game of the day, it's on Fox, is Texas, their first ever meeting in the Big House against Michigan. It's remarkable to think about 2 brands that big that have never faced in the Big House. Listen, I was a Michigan believer all last year. I mean, Harbaugh on the sidelines or not, they were hammering people. But Michigan lost 8 of 11 offensive starters, a star quarterback, a star receiver, a star back, top offensive lineman. And those were also, in many instances, leaders. So not only do you lose Jim Harbaugh, which I think the cultural vibe of the toughness, physicality will remain, even if this coach isn't the right coach. My feeling is, I mean, Mark Helfrich wasn't the perfect fit for Chip Kelly, but for a year, you couldn't tell the difference. I think there's a lot of momentum, program momentum for Michigan. But they just lost too many leaders and too much firepower on offense. And I think they're a team that will be able to win a certain way. I think Texas can win anyway. Shootout, close. They're better at quarterback. Now, they lost 3 receivers to the NFL. But it's Texas, it's Sark. I don't worry about the offense. I talked to Sark this week. He said it's hard for him to differentiate, in some instances, starters from backups with Texas. And we tend to rush to a judgment with these high-profile coaches. A Kiffin, a Sark, a Lincoln Riley, a Harbaugh. You can't, this stuff takes 2 and 3 years, even with big brands, to get up to speed. So you're in the Ohio State class. You're in the Georgia and Alabama class. This is the first time I look at Texas and think, yeah, they can go toe-to-toe with anybody. I didn't like them on the back end last year. Washington exposed that. Michael Penix exposed that. I think Texas has a chance to play for the national championship. I think they bring back more experience. That offensive line for Texas now, that's some first and second round talent. That's a lot of starts. They may have some new receivers, a new back. That's a lot of starts. And Quinn Ewers, from diet to his play on the field, is a little bit more structured to me last year than what I saw initially. Was not a big fan initially, just played too loose, too Jay Cutler to me. I like Texas here. Now, again, I think it's a pretty low-scoring game. I think Michigan has some top defenders. They're at home. Even good college teams can struggle away from home. I looked at this morning. It opened at Texas -4. It's now Texas -7. I think the Longhorns win. I think it's probably pretty close. But I think you'll watch that game, and from a more dynamic offense to the better quarterback, I think you're going to feel like Texas. They may stumble a little early, intimidating, big house. I think they pull away late. A little bit like how Michigan beat Ohio State last couple of years. Physicality, leaned on them, late third quarter on. You're going to feel like the better team, the better roster, the better chance of the national championship is Texas. I like the Horns here by about 6.